Hi everyone, today we have several fourth-year medical students giving you their favorite study resources for internal medicine, the study schedule that they used, and general tips that they have so you can do well on your third-year rotations. What study resources do you recommend for this rotation?
Like with everything else, the main thing is UWorld, and there's so much on UWorld that just to get through that on your rotation is probably enough, just focusing on that. I used a tiny bit of online med ed. Internal medicine was my last rotation, and so by that point I had already watched a lot of the online med ed, but re-watched some things just to freshen up on them. I had wanted to do pre-test and case files, and I didn't get around to it. So for that, I really just stuck with UWorld, and then I would listen to Curbsider's podcast on my commute, which actually got me some pimping questions right, but wasn't super helpful for the shelf.
So for internal medicine, it kind of covered everything, but basically for every rotation, I kind of had the same routine, starting off with case files and pre-test as a base for each rotation. Case files was good because it kind of went through all the main topics and had some practice questions in there, and I'd make sure to kind of supplement that with pre-test. And then in addition to that, I tried to have some UWorld questions that I was doing every single day, just to make sure I was prepared for the shelf exam. Just because internal medicine covers pretty much every single topic, you need to get a little bit of everything. So case files, pre-test, online med ed was also good. Watching the videos, he does a really good job. And then in addition to that, since I had a long commute time from where I was living, I always tried to listen to podcasts in the car. So I just went on iTunes podcasts and kind of just searched internal medicine, and I came across the Curbsiders, and then there's random subspecialty podcasts that were available as well. There's one for general surgery, and there's one for the other subspecialties that you can listen to, and they kind of cover everything that you need to know, and probably more than you need to know as a third year. But just listening to that in the background while I was driving kind of gave me a good base, and actually has some good questions and answers for when your attendings pimp you.
Internal medicine is one of the harder ones because you kind of have to know everything about everything, and a lot of times you don't get the opportunity to see a lot of it on the wards. So I brought all my books with me. I used this, it's called Pocket Medicine. When I was actually in rotations, I would keep this in my white coat. It's not necessarily a good resource to study everything, but it's great to look things up one by one during the day so that you kind of solidify your thoughts for that. I also used, this one is probably the better study resource. It's called Step Up to Medicine. It's a little bit more like first aid in the way that it's designed. There's little quick hits on the side that you can look up. And that's what I made sure that I went through front to back during the actual rotation. And then the standard stuff, other than that, I used a lot of UWorld. There's about 1 million UWorld questions that are considered medicine, so I definitely didn't get through them during my IM rotation, but other people did. Props to them. But UWorld's definitely the best. And the MBMEs are good too.
For internal medicine, I think the best ones are UWorld is the number one, and then Step Up to Medicine is a great book as well. I went through the entire UWorld question bank, and I felt that was enough to study.
Internal medicine is a tricky one because even though it's usually a long rotation wherever you take it, 8 to 10 weeks, there's really not that much time to study. So for IM, I actually only used UWorld the entire time. Yeah, I just recommend trying to get through all of UWorld, which is all of the medicine questions, which I think there's 1,500 questions or something. And if you can get through that, you'd probably be set. In addition to that, I did Anki, the Clerkships deck. That was the only one I'd used for that.
Internal medicine is a big one. That's the most intense block, I think, in terms of just the knowledge base. I used predominantly just UWorld and online med ed. And then I just did all of the NBMEs that they had available. I think there were 3 or 4 of those. And whenever I do the NBMEs, I always do them timed. I don't do tutor mode because I want to get in that rhythm of knowing what that question length is going to be like, what the test length is going to be like, and sort of get me in that sort of cadence of taking those questions for that length. So definitely try and get through UWorld if you can. It's a big block. There's a lot of UWorld questions, so if you don't finish all of it, it's okay. I didn't get through all of it when I was in IM, but try to get through most of it, and just sort of whatever works for you. But I would say definitely start with UWorld and the NBMEs, and then I like to do online med ed lectures in the car. That was just a nice way to kind of add studying and take advantage of free time. So
for me, my situation was different because it was my last rotation. I finished it a week ago. I took that shelf exam, and now I'm taking step 2 weeks from tomorrow. For all rotations, for the first half of it, I did MBME exams. They're floating out there online. During the second half of it, I basically just have been doing random UWorld questions for all blocks because that kind of incorporates my Step 2 studying along with IM, because so much of Step 2 is IM or medicine in general.
How did you schedule your studying for this rotation?
Just whenever possible. The rotation I was on for my last month of IM had a lot of varying hours, so it was hard to get into any one set schedule for, I'll study from 5 to 10 or whatever, because some days I get home at 3, some days I get home at 6. So it was really just, when I was at my rotation, I focused on the rotation. If there was downtime in the morning, maybe I would do a couple UWorld questions. But most of my studying was when I got home at night. I just had to power through. I'm tired. It's hard. It's the worst. But you just power through, a couple hours, get through at least a block of UWorld at the end of the day.
So I used to be a night studier during the first 2 years, but for rotations, usually you had to be there at 7 or 8 a.m. or even earlier. Especially for IM, things tend to start pretty early. I tried to wake up even earlier than that and try to do some UWorld in the morning. So I try to wake up an hour before I had to drive, do 10 to 20 questions in the morning, that way to have some studying, even if when I came home I was already tired. But the big thing is trying to do a little bit every single day, just because you're going to be at rotation, you're going to be tired when you come home.
Studying in IM is hard because the hours can be really, really long. The nice thing about working in an inpatient setting is that you get some weird free time during the day. So whenever that happened, I tried to either be doing UWorld or flashcards. I'm really bad at doing flashcards, but I would try to do some just in free time during the day on my cell phone. So whenever I was done seeing a patient, we were just kind of hanging around waiting for new consults, I would be doing something on my phone or on the computer. I use Anki Web a lot on all the hospital computers because you don't need to download anything to be able to do it. But it's hard, and you get home and all you want to do is sleep. Definitely, I made sure to take Fridays off when we had didactics, because I just needed a day where I didn't have to work and didn't have to use my brain. But then you kind of have to come home and force yourself to study every night. Setting a specific goal of what you want to do. For me, I set a number of pages in Step Up that I wanted to read, or I set a specific number of UWorld questions to do, which I did not always meet, but doing that helped me make sure that I was actually doing something, because it's hard.
So what I did is I took all of the UWorld questions and I broke it up by how many days I had in that internal medicine rotation. So for us, it was 8 weeks. So I made it so I had a fixed amount every day during the week, and then slightly more on the weekends. I think it came down to 20 questions during the weekdays and then 40 questions on the weekends. And that got me through the whole block, and it got me through the NBME practice questions.
I'm a morning person, which was really difficult because rounds are really early in the morning. It's around 6 a.m. I still woke up an hour early to do 15 UWorld questions every day. I would just do them and then not actually grade them. And then once I'd get out of my rotation, or maybe if I had some free time during my actual rotation, I would go through the answers and actually review them. And then that's basically what I did. Early morning and then afterwards.
It's hard. I'm not going to lie. IM and surgery are definitely the two hardest in terms of just the length of time that you're at the hospital. So it's really hard to get home after a long, long day and chunk out a time for studying. But you have to try your best to do, even if it's something as small as 10 problems a day. If you can keep it small and you can keep it manageable, it helps you kind of get in a rhythm and feel like you're accomplishing something and working towards the goal. So
basically halfway through, I kind of just started my Step 2 studying with doing a block of questions each night from UWorld as I had time.
What general tips would you recommend to do well on this rotation?
I would say it's not really any different than any of the other rotations. Read every day, for sure. Know things like DKA, hyponatremia, shock, sepsis really, really well, because every preceptor you have will probably ask you about those. And then in general, just be the kind of person people like to work with, because you're spending a lot of time with your preceptors and they're trusting you with their patients. And so if you're the kind of person who they can trust, who they like to be around, that'll get you a good eval, which is, I think, just as important as your shelf score.
You're not going to know everything just because, especially if you start on it early in your third year, you're going to feel kind of lost just because you see patients with a wide variety of diseases. The big thing's going to be reading up on your patients, showing up early, and kind of just showing your attendings that you're pretty interested. Also, talking to the nurses, talking to the other staff, they'll help you out a lot because you're as a third year, you're kind of lost in the hospital.
In IM, it's just kind of admitting what you don't know and then going up and looking it up later. So your attendings are going to pimp you a lot, not in a bad way, but just on things that you need to know and things that there's no way you're going to know because we just haven't been exposed to it. And just being like, yeah, I don't know what that is, but I'll go home and look it up. Or I look it up in this or look it up on Up to Date, and following through on that because it's going to help you learn that a lot and it's going to help you do it. What I also did during IM is that I kept this little notebook in my pocket, and then I would write down all of the things, like you can see there's a list for IM. Write down all of the things that I like needed to look up from that day so that I could do it the next day. So like here's one day and it's like 4 different topics that my preceptor pimped me on that I just didn't know. So that I looked it up that night and then I put it in here so that if he asked me the next day, I could be like, yes, I learned about that and here are your answers. But it also helped me study for the test.
Get there early. Every day. It just make sure you're always early and that you have your patient completely prepared, know your patient cold, have all of the information that you might think is pertinent ready to go and ready to present. If you don't have it memorized, have it on a piece of paper, have it on a note card. It's really all about knowing your patient. That's how you're going to shine. The other thing I would recommend is, as a resource, I would recommend the MassGen Little Orange Book. That's a fantastic one. That's the one I think that everybody needs before going into internal medicine rotation.
I'd recommend trying to get through the UWorld questions if you can. IM is hard because it was definitely the hardest rotation for me. I want to go into IM and I still felt like it was the hardest shelf I took. And there was a lot of pressure to do well, of course. I think this is the advice that all residents and attendings give you, but it's so true for IM. After you see a case in the hospital, look up that case afterwards because it's much more interesting to see afterwards. Things like DKA, heart failure, COPD exacerbations. After you see a patient and see the management, go and memorize those algorithms. I think it's much more easier to memorize it that way after you have that patient in mind versus just like remembering all these medications and fluid concentrations that you have to give this patient and things like that.
Well, like I said, it's a ton of material, so the likelihood that you're going to get through absolutely everything in that very busy 8 weeks is kind of unlikely, but if you try the best you can to get through all of that material. And one thing I found that really helped, certainly with surgery cases and IM, if you can find a patient that has that particular disease and then you go home that night and read up about it, it really helps you stick that patient with that condition. And then you can kind of think, you know, like, oh yeah, they did have a rash, or like, oh yeah, they were hypotensive, that kind of thing. So if you can find an actual patient to link the condition to, it's much easier than that.